So now I want to go to talk to Tom Farrell, who is scratch building his layout, and see what wonderful model he has for us this evening. Tom, welcome.
Thank you again for having me. And tonight I'm actually going to be working on the layout, which is, I haven't really worked on the layout in about a year, actually. I've been focusing on making structures. So what I'm basically doing is I'm going to punch a hole through the backdrop and connect the front third of the layout to the rear 2/3 of the layout, which is actually considerably larger than the front that you guys have seen over the past year and a half. So I'll give you a little overview to try and orient where exactly this is on my layout. And then I'll show you how I punched a hole in here and made a runaround. So these are rare shots because I always show composed shots in my layout. So nobody ever actually sees under the bench work or the ceiling. So they're in essence snapshots. But this is Shantytown over here. This is my covered bridge. This is what I call Brady's Bend. And this is where the tunnels are going to be where I punch through that backdrop. So you enter the room by coming up these steps to your right, and this is the first thing you see. That is Shantytown, which it's about 6 months of work, and everybody's should be familiar with that if they've been watching the show. This is Brady's Bend. This was the first area I scenicked on my new rustic buff and old Gothic. And those tunnels are to the right of this. And to the left of this is the Monongah Coal Company and the town of Turtle Creek. So this basically, the front third of the layout is here, what I just showed you. And then it gets connected here, which will be a future mountain. A little freight yard here. And then there'll be a town down here. The next photo is me standing right here. Oh, no. The next photo after this one is me standing right here, looking the other direction. So basically that loop comes around, goes behind me, goes around, and then goes behind this wall. And key to me putting up this backdrop and finishing this and putting up the backdrop is finishing this concealed loop, which is behind the scenery here, behind this wall. So clearing off all the temporary structures that were sitting there. The covered bridge is to your right. Jim Kello's Dam is right here. This is the Brady's Bend here. So the object is to cut a hole in this wall. So the first thing I did is drill 4 holes. This is just Masonite with the photo backdrop on it. Looking at the other side, there's the Masonite. Then just with a crude saw, a drywall saw, I cut through this Masonite like it wasn't even there. When those are big teeth on that saw. I considered getting out a jigsaw, but I tried this first. I mean, it literally just cut it like it was butter. And there's the hole and showing the bench work, which is a combination at this point of the, I can't pronounce it, Mommy bench work and then my own bench work. It transitions right here. These are under construction. They're early stages here, but I wanted to line it up, make sure that I had adequate clearance for the penetration through the backdrop. At this point, there's no bench work back there. If you see, that's just a hole. I did a little bench work. And there's some of the bench work. The layout is basically the bench work in 2-inch foam. So this is what I had to build to do this. I just took this piece was in place, but I had to add this piece here and this piece. This is the piece of foam that I had to specially cut to fit out around this brace and in here. I mean, it's easy to work with foam. It took minutes to do this. And a surf foam, just grind away at it. Makes a lot of styrofoam. Then to the right of what I just showed you, I put additional bench work in there. This runs along the back wall behind there's the backdrop. This is about a 30-foot run. Put it in perspective. The idea is if there's a problem, I can reach my hand up in here and get the problem. I am going to put a guardrail here. I was looking for foam glue and nobody seemed to have it. And I found this Loctite all-purpose power grab glue that's compatible with foam. A normal construction adhesive will melt this closed cell foam. This stuff, I have to tell you, works perfectly. It really does grab. I didn't have to put weights on it or anything. I mean, it's not going anywhere. And I did this in several pieces, about 4 pieces, because it was a very complex number of components here. So there's 1 piece, 2 piece, 3, 4 pieces, all specialty cut, really. And then there's so many ways to put down track. My way is I take rubber cement and I put it down on the closed cell foam. Then I also put rubber cement on the back of the cork. I put several layers and then I just pin it down. The reason I use rubber cement is it seems to adhere very well to these two different materials. Later, when I put in the track, I use contact cement, a non-water soluble contact cement. So that when I put down the ballast, which has Elmer's glue and typically Woodland Scenic cement, it's water-based. I don't want it to dissolve my track off the cork. So I use a waterproof glue for that. So there's the pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4. And these are sort of a little distorted. That's not a very tight turn. Actually, that's a 24-inch radius, 48-inch diameter, technically. It's a nice easement there. Another shot from the front of the layout. I use these push pins to hold everything in place. After a couple hours, I usually let it sit there overnight, then I pull the pins out. Got to have a lot of pins when you do this. I'll put guardrails here so that the trains don't, if there's a derailment or some issue, they don't fall to the floor. Wanted to show a minute here how I solder my rail joiners together. This was the setup to install the flex track. This is going to be pushed down to that area that you just saw down here. What you're seeing in that right now is this section. I added 2 pieces of flex track here. I soldered the flex track onto here, then I'll push it into place so I don't have to do contortionist to put in flex track here. If that makes sense to you. But I wanted to show you my soldering rig. So what you just saw is this. I added this flex track and 2 rail joiners. When you're soldering, especially, I like a lot of light. So I bring this light over. I invested in this Weller soldering rig. I got to tell you, this is one of the best investments I've ever made in I used to use those inexpensive soldering irons. They used to come from Radio Shack, they're real cheap. And this, you can set the temperature. I set it to 850 degrees. I bought this soldering stand so that when this is hot like that, I have a place to put it. This is a little soldering sponge. I just put water in there. And there's two types of rosin that I use. So my drill is I get this up to 850 degrees. It'll go hotter, but that's what I do, 850F. I wipe the tip onto the sponge. I dip it. This is a tinning solution, like a powdered solder. And now I have a very bright tip. It's oxide free. It's totally tinned. And I use this flux for the track itself. And this is a thin, just a thin solder. So the key is to have a good physical mechanical joint when you solder. If you don't have the rail joiner perfectly 50-50 here, and you don't have this flat, everything's got to be mechanically perfect before you solder. So you try to minimize these gaps. So you push the rail down, get it as tight as you can. This is going behind scenic board. So the track has to be, even though it's straight as an arrow, it has to be, every joint has to be perfect, because I don't want any problems back there. So I've got my rail joiner 50-50. I've got these, they're not kinked, flat, or lifted. They're perfectly perpendicular to one another. And then I solder it. And well, that's about as good as you can get. That's a nice flow. It's silver. I'll go back and I'll knock the top of this off. I'll just hit it lightly with a fingernail file, and then I'll polish it out so that there's no, that it's smooth, so it won't capture dirt or anything. But that's what you're looking for. All silver, no cold joint, completely across the rail joint. I'll go in and I'll file that so that's perfectly flush, even though that would work just fine. So, again, soldering is all about a good mechanical joint. Get everything nice and hot. You just have to touch and go when it's that hot. Otherwise, you'd melt everything. Clean it, clean the tip here, dump it in the flux, tin it, have this ready to go on your track. You get joints like that every time. I mean, you just can't miss. That's all I have for you this evening.
Does anybody have any questions for Tom?
No structure.
I think you did a great job.
Yeah. Well, it's scratch building a layout, so not every night's a structure, right?
Not every night's a structure. Thank you so very much. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.